Hey, it's Terry, and this is the Something Spooky review for Annabelle Comes Home. Annabelle Comes Home was released in June 2019 by Warner Brothers, and it is the seventh film in the Conjuring universe. It has a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is up considerably from the previous entries in the universe, like The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona, both of which I do reviews for on this channel. And I would agree that this movie is a big improvement on those movies out of the gate and is somewhat of a return to form for the Conjuring universe, which is good to report. It had a $30 million budget, which was a little bit higher than some of the other films in the franchise, and it had a $231 million box office return, which, while very good, and I'm sure they weren't too disappointed with, is notably way lower than The Nun's $365 million. So that's kind of interesting, since this is the third installment in the Annabelle franchise. In addition to being the seventh film in the Conjuring universe, it seems like there's a lot building to it, and I remember the promotion being pretty strong for it, with the Warrens featured in it. So I am surprised that that number isn't a little bit higher. So it is Gary Dauberman's directorial debut, and while it's his directorial debut, he had wrote pretty much the rest of the Conjuring universe, and he also wrote the It films. So very accomplished writer, some of my favorite movies, really. And this is his directorial debut, so that's very cool. In addition to that, just being neat in its own, it also marks a series of these Conjuring universe films now, like a few in a row, that are directorial debuts or near to it for the director involved, because The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona both had directors who are pretty fresh and new to the scene. So it's cool that they are, giving these projects to young directors, kind of brewing their own little homegrown team here, and it's interesting. I hope to see what all these guys keep doing next. So as I said right off the bat, I do really like Annabelle Comes Home. I think it is a lot better than The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona and even the other Annabelle movies. I liked Annabelle Creation. It was really good. I don't like it quite as much as everybody else, but I did think that it was much better than the first Annabelle film. But still, this might be my favorite film since like The Conjuring 2. I'm not sure exactly when that timeline is, but outside of the two actual Conjuring films, this might be my favorite film in the Conjuring universe. I think it's really well done. A lot of that is because it captures this great 70s horror vibe that The Conjuring also did, and that's what makes those films so special. And it's just in this, very attention to detail sort of way with colors and costumes and just the look of the film. I haven't really seen much reporting on like what kind of filters they use on or lenses on the cameras and stuff, but it just kind of has this kind of like grainy look, like a lot of 70s movies, horror movies especially, did. And so like it just has this very authentic feel to its time, contemporary to when the story is taking place in the 70s, and that unfolds with a lot of the music and props in the film, like it has in other films. Like these movies always have pretty effective soundtracks and know when to bring in big well-known hits for effect at the right time, but also not go too far with that. Like it's easy to get carried away with that, and then it turns into this like kind of big cheese fest about it. And like I feel like these films and this one always do a pretty good job of like introducing those elements to set the time, to set the place, to make you a little nostalgic, but they don't go overboard with it. So diving into this film, it starts with the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine Warren. In the beginning of the movie, it almost starts like The Conjuring 3. It's like the most kind of hands-on time we've had with these characters since The Conjuring 2. We've seen them, pop up other places, and there's been like footage used of them in other films, and a lot of the sequels or the sequels in the Conjuring universe, sometimes they almost feel more like spin-offs, even though they're all just like numbered entries in this Conjuring universe. But a lot of them just kind of vaguely, reference or throw back to these events for a while this one picks like right up with the Warrens, and it feels like it's going to be a Conjuring film. And the time we have with them is great. It made me realize how much I kind of missed actually spending time with those characters, and how much I'm looking forward to Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It, which is supposed to be coming out later this year. Sadly, they're not around for the whole movie, but that's okay because the characters in this movie are pretty good. That's another area where it improves greatly on its immediate predecessors in the series. I think The Nun and The Curse of La Llorona both had kind of different, but still both had problems with their characters. And this group of characters is pretty likable, and there's enough of them, and they're on enough kind of different paths that it feels like there is some threat to them. It's not just like this nucleus of core characters, which was kind of a problem for me in a few of the last films. Like this one, you kind of don't know you don't feel like you know what's going to happen to everybody all the time. And they're all just good. I really liked the characters. It is kind of silly, I think, like how we end up with these characters. I'm trying not to go into story stuff too much, but the idea that the Warrens just like leave this group of kids and teenagers to babysit themselves in their house with like this haunted armory of things. It's one of those leaps in logic that it's just like, okay, well, this like probably never should have even been allowed to start happening, but it is what it is, and they all do a good job, all the actors and actresses involved. I liked most of the characters, and I especially liked Judy Warren, the Warren's daughter, and we had like kind of like seen her in other things before, but she wasn't ever really a character. So like the fact that she is actually a character in this and has her own kind of stakes and personality and everything that's happening was interesting. There are a lot of great scares throughout. I won't try to ruin everyone in particular, but like I like just the general way they pulled off scares in this movie. There were a lot more practical effects, like we had seen in the Conjuring universe, and like had continued to pop up through the series, but sometimes started to get eclipsed by the CG effects. This one really went back more to like what felt like traditional Conjuring scares, but pulled off in a new and pretty effective way. But it had that spirit and everything. This feels very tense, and I think you're kind of like just watching these expertly crafted suspense horror scenes, and it's very effective, and it feels like just the most kind of clever and creative the series has been with a lot of these setups in a while. There's a lot of great scenes in particular. I like the wedding dress woman. You start dealing with a lot of the different artifacts in the Warren's room, the like haunted armory room, and so you kind of get all of these different ghosts and monsters, that you encounter individually, and I liked that one. I liked the ferryman. The TV scene was really cool. I really liked that. Like it seems like it could almost be like its own, Black Mirror like episode or something like that, Goosebumps book, because it's just such a creative concept. I'm sure it's appeared in things before like that, but the way they do it in such a kind of restrained way, because you only have so much time with it, it's just one of the things happening, so they have to like get it through to you very quickly what it is supposed to be doing, and then make it scary, and then kind of like exit from it all in a very quick scene. It's effective, and it's a cool one, and there's a lot of things like that are just kind of good little scares on their own. It's this big haunted house ride of a movie. I mean, it all pretty much takes place in the Warrens' house, which is interesting too, because we've of course been there and we've of course seen scary things there in the previous movies. But this is kind of like the first time it's like all about their house, and like they're not even there. The Warrens aren't even there, but like their daughter and the babysitters are dealing with all of this stuff, slinking around the Warren house. So it's a very much a haunted house movie, and it has that roller coaster feel where you're just kind of like flying through all of these different scary scenes and different scary monsters and threats, and it just never really loses its edge. It's well paced. The I think it's also the scariest Annabelle has ever felt herself, which is important. She was pretty spooky in Annabelle Creation when she would kind of like show up, but there was such other indirect kind of ways that she threatened people, and same with the first film, where in the first film she's like, it's very iconic, like the images of her just like always kind of sitting around, and it's not like she does much more than that specifically in this, but the way that it's executed is good, and because she's like working with all of these other ghosts in the house, it just kind of makes her seem like this more omnipotent evil presence, and it's really effective for what she's supposed to be here in the third film in her own franchise. And I feel like really starting to find that monster identity. There are some problems in the film. It's not perfect. There are some gaps in logic, like we kind of already talked about, and just like, why would the characters ever do that? Or they're really taking liberties or stretching like the suspension of belief of like how this would happen, why these characters would do this. There's some things like that, of course. There are some predictable outcomes and moments in the movie. I won't spoil anything, but it just kind of does still stay a little bit formulaic to the franchise. There are there's a problem for me in this franchise. This weird middle line where like I don't expect like a big body count from these films. It's not really what I want, but at the same time, it doesn't ever really feel like anybody's super threatened, and you don't really know what the motivation of the spirits really is, if they're just scaring these people. And that's come up sometimes in confrontations with the ghosts. Like, what do you want? Why are you doing this? And basically they're just trying to make people miserable and drive them insane, and in some cases they end up killing people or getting them to kill themselves or whatever. But there still this kind of remains this like weird lack of real depths for the series, where it's, after so many entries here in the seventh entry, it's kind of like, well, where is this all getting to? Like, why are they doing this? Like, why is this happening to these people? Or, why are the ghosts even interested in doing this kind of? And they're all just malevolent spirits, so I get it. But overall, it was a really good movie. I liked the setting a lot. I liked the way that they, translate the time and make that very visually apparent and apparent in the audio, and just the characters were really good and the scares were great. I really think it's maybe this one of the scariest films in the series, and certainly in a while, in the way it just really kind of like achieves what the series is known to do, but lands it really well and feels like they're kind of like working on all cylinders again, and getting fired back into their own game, which really has me excited for the next Conjuring movie. Overall, I'm going to give Annabelle Comes Home a B. I really liked it. I think it's really good. It's one of the best. It's right up there with the original Conjuring movies for me, and Annabelle Creation is the best in the series. So it's a good one. Check it out. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And remember to follow Something Spooky. Thanks.